Well, here we are on the church history trail today again, and we find ourselves in the little town of SAINTFIELD, and we're actually in the First Presbyterian Church in SAINTFIELD. As you can see, one of their buildings is getting renovated, but we see here that this church was actually built in 1777. If you can see that up at the top. And of course there's the famous Battle of SAINTFIELD, which was led by the United Irishmen against the government troops. And of course, historically speaking, this church has a great connection with the Battle of SAINTFIELD, because it was during that time, it was in 1798, the minister was the Reverend Thomas Ledley Birch, and he was one of the leaders here in SAINTFIELD of the United Irishmen, and so some of his congregation actually joined him, and he actually became chaplain to the United Irishmen in County Down. Now, there were different motives for people to take up arms within the ranks of the United Irishmen. We're just going down the side of the church here towards the graveyard, but there was different motives why people would take up arms within the ranks of the United Irishmen. For example, there was Henry Joy McCracken and also Jimmy Hope. If you remember, Jimmy Hope was, I mentioned him in a Spartan band whenever we were in Antrim, and we looked at the Battle of Antrim. And Jimmy Hope, of course, during the Battle of Antrim, was under the command of Henry Joy McCracken. But these men, for instance, their motives in taking up arms would have been contemporary revolutionary ideology, or in other words, a social justice, and also the rights of man. And so it was philosophical, it was political. But then there were other men who, for example, took that even further. The likes of the Reverend Birch, who I've just mentioned, and also the Reverend William Steele Dixon, who both these men were Presbyterian ministers. Reverend Steele Dixon was the Presbyterian minister in Portaferry. And so they actually elaborated more on these ideas and this ideology. They would have been more seen it as a political gospel, or in other words, scripture politics, basically a biblically based concern for a just society. So it wasn't only political for the likes of Reverend Birch or the Reverend William Steele Dixon, it was actually a scriptural concern as well. Now, the Reverend Birch was actually arrested, and he was forced to migrate to America, along with a number of others, after the insurgents was put down in County Down. Of course, the last battle in County Down was the Battle of Ballynahinch, which was fought a few days after the Battle of SAINTFIELD. And of course, then the Reverend Birch, he was arrested, but then they spared his life. In fact, the only Presbyterian minister who was executed for their part in the 1798 rebellion was James Porter of Grey Abbey. But Reverend Birch had to migrate to America, and we're coming down now through the graveyard, and we're actually heading down towards the battle field itself. But some of the insurgents, a lot of the insurgents, and also the government forces are actually buried here. And we're coming now to a wee sign, and what this wee sign says here is, near this spot was fought the Battle of SAINTFIELD on Saturday, the 9th of June 1798, between the United Irishmen and the Royalist forces. Most of the dead of both sides are interred. At the rear of this plaque. The two adjoining headstones are those of insurgents who fell that day. And so most of the Most of the dead that fell that day are actually buried here, although some were took away by relatives. You can see the two graves here of two insurgents. That's only two marked graves that there is. And we'll just have a wee look at the front of that. And there you can see the two graves. I think the first one is James McEwen. I think it's James McEwen. The other one's very plain, you can see it. It says here lies the body of John Laurie, and he died on June 19, 1798, aged 46 years. And so he must have died from wounds and resulted from the battle. But these were two insurgents who took part in the Battle of SAINTFIELD on the 9th of June 1798. It's a lovely wee spot here, and I would highly recommend it for you to come and have a look at the battle scene and read all the billboards, and it's a great day as well here for it today. And there's a wee memorial here which I'll just read out to you. It says, in memory of the York Fencibles, yeomen and United Irishmen who died at the Battle of SAINTFIELD, 9th of June 1798. The first billboard there is 1775 to 1798, and it gives you the historical background to the battle. And then the one further on is 1791, and it's the Society of United Irishmen, and so it tells you a wee bit of information about the United Irishmen. And so basically what happened was, and here you're seeing the river here, the battle actually would have taken place in this area. There's a wee river here, I'll just show you. There's also a monument at the far side, just over there, straight in front of us. But you would have to go down Cumber Street, which is there, and then drive on round the Cumber Road. And it's just a stone's throw in that direction. It's a memorial to the Fencibles and to the battle of that day. But we also see here another wee plaque which I'm going to take the time to read to you, and it says 1798, the Battle of SAINTFIELD. SAINTFIELD in the 1790s was well known for its radical views, and it was here that the rebellion in County Down was ignited. A very large force of probably over 5,000 rebels gathered on the Ockley Hill on the 9th of June 1798. Colonel Chetwynd Stapleton, I think that is, was dispatched from Cumber with a force of 270 York Fencibles, 30 Norge Yeoman Cavalry and 50 infantry. They halted about a mile outside the village, and scouts were sent forward to establish the whereabouts of the rebels. The scouts failed to see a party of rebels, probably between 500 and 1,000 men, hidden behind the high hedges and in the thick scrub on either side of the narrow roadway. The reason why they were sent was because the day previous, a loyalist house, McKee, had been attacked by the rebels, and the 8 inside the house were killed when they set the house on fire, and the 8 inhabitants of the house were killed. And so that's why these government troops had been sent the next day then to SAINTFIELD. Having been told by the scouts that the village was empty, the troops advanced in narrow file and were attacked, firstly from the hill above the road and then from the marshy ground below. The fighting lasted about an hour, resulting in the death of 56 officers and men of the Fencibles and yeomen. The number of rebels killed is unknown, but may have been greater as the Fencibles deployed their 2 6-pound field guns, having suffered heavy losses. However, Colonel Chetwynd Stapleton ordered a retreat. Local lore is that Reverend Birch fought on the rebel side at SAINTFIELD, though he later denied this when charged with treason and consorting with rebels. He is said to have preached to the rebels at their camp on Creevy Rocks on Pike Sunday, the 10th of June It is a reflection of many family divisions at the time that his brother, Dr. George Birch, remained loyal to the Crown and was a yeomanry officer, while Dr. Birch's two sons fought on the rebel side at Saintfield. At his trial, Reverend Birch narrowly escaped hanging and was forced into exile in America for the rest of his life. And that other stone, which was found hard to read, is actually James McEwen. So the first one was James McEwen, and the second gravestone is John Laurie. And so that's the battle site there. And of course, the rebels were hiding in the woods, and whenever the government's troops advanced, then they were set upon, and of course it was a rebel victory. And so that's the Battle of Saintfield.